These are the 7 levels of zombie bunkers. Level 1. Trash bunkers. When zombies pour into the streets and you've got 30 seconds before teeth meet flesh, you're not thinking about sustainability or long-term survival. You're thinking about that car with the doors still intact, that attic ladder you can yank up behind you, or that billboard platform 20 feet off the ground where rotting hands can't reach. These are trash bunkers, the kind of shelter that buys you minutes, not days, and they're exactly what they sound like. Desperate hiding spots that delay the inevitable rather than prevent it. In Zombieland, Columbus survives the early days by treating every location like it's already compromised, which means his RV becomes a mobile panic room on wheels. The beauty of trash bunkers is their availability. Every city block has a dozen options if you're fast and crazy enough to claim them. 28 Days Later shows Jim stumbling through abandoned London, ducking into corners and doorways, using elevation and enclosed spaces to stay invisible while the rage-infected sprint past. Resident Evil's Hive outbreak forces survivors into closets and storage rooms, cramped spaces where a single bite means everyone dies. But standing in the open means that death can come a lot faster. Shaun of the Dead plays it for laughs when Shaun and Ed briefly consider hiding in a closet before realizing they'd rather take their chances with the pub, but that moment captures the essence of Level 1. It's not a plan, it's a reflex. It's a mechanism from our brains that try to find the simplest answer for a problem, even if it's not the best. The mechanics are stupidly simple. Zombies, especially the slow shuffling kind, can't climb ladders or climb walls. So height becomes your best friend. A treehouse that wouldn't survive a strong wind suddenly becomes prime real estate when corpses are piling up below, reaching upward with fingers that'll never quite make it. The problem is these spots have zero sustainability. No food, no water, no way to sleep without falling off and landing in the horde you were trying to avoid. You're buying yourself 1 to 5 minutes of safety, maybe an hour if you're lucky and the zombies get distracted by easier prey. And even so, you could be just putting yourself in even more danger if you choose the wrong spot to crash. But here's where things get really interesting. Trash bunkers fail the second you start thinking of them as permanent. The closet in Resident Evil works when Alice uses it to dodge a single zombie in a hallway. It stops working when you're trapped inside with no exit strategy and the door's about to give up. That's the trap of Level 1. People get comfortable in spaces that were never meant to sustain them, and comfort kills. They think a simple place can make for a simple survival, when in reality it will most likely make for a quick demise. Zombieland's Columbus survives because his rules account for this. Rule 17, don't be a hero. Rule 22, when in doubt, you must know your way out. Trash bunkers demand that kind of discipline because they offer nothing else. There are no walls thick enough to stop a horde, no supplies to outlast a siege, just empty space and borrowed time. But if a locked car and a rooftop can buy you 5 minutes, what happens when you get your hands on an actual building with walls and doors? Keep that question in mind, because what feels like safety might be the most dangerous illusion in the apocalypse. Level 2, basic bunkers. Now that you've got 4 walls, a roof that doesn't leak, and a door you can barricade with furniture, congratulations, you've graduated to a basic bunker. The kind of place that feels like safety because it looks like the world before everything went to hell. Houses, apartments, the occasional rural cabin, these are simple shelters that come preloaded with the comforts of normal life, which makes them incredibly appealing but just as dangerous as a simple trash bunker. Because comfort tricks you into staying longer than you should, and staying too long means you're there when the walls come down. Night of the Living Dead built the blueprint for basic bunkers in 1968 with that farmhouse in Pennsylvania. 7 strangers trapped inside while ghouls pound on the doors and crawl through windows. The house has everything they need in theory. Furniture to block entrances, a cellar to hide in, even a radio to hear how bad things are getting everywhere else. But the real threat isn't the zombies tearing at the boards, it's the people inside tearing at each other. Ben and Harry spend more time fighting over strategy than implementing it, and by the time the ghouls break through, the survivors have already destroyed themselves from within. The Night Eats the World takes this isolation to its logical extreme. Sam wakes up in a Paris apartment after a party, discovers the city's been overrun, and spends the entire film alone in a building that should be perfect. Multiple floors, supplies scavenged from neighboring units, enough space to set up drums and play music to keep himself sane. But the apartment becomes a prison as much as a sanctuary. Days turn into weeks, weeks into months. And Sam starts talking to a zombie trapped in the elevator shaft because that's the closest thing to human interaction he's got. Cargo flips the script by putting its basic bunker on water. Andy and his family survive on a houseboat, floating on a river where zombies can't follow. And for a while it's perfect. Mobile, isolated, self-contained. Then Kay gets bitten. The clock starts ticking and the houseboat stops being a home and starts being a countdown timer. The technical specs of basic bunkers are simple. Board the windows, barricade the doors, destroy the stairs if you've got a second floor. Night of the Living Dead shows this process in excruciating detail. They nail planks across windows, pile furniture against the doors, argue about whether the cellar or the main floor is safer. Every decision feels urgent because every decision matters. The problem is basic bunkers weren't designed to withstand sieges. Windows break, doors splinter, and eventually the sheer weight of bodies pressing against the structure finds a weak point. The psychological toll is worse than the structural failure. The Night Eats the World spends an hour and a half showing what happens when you've got all the security you need, but none of the human connection. Sam's apartment has reinforced doors, plenty of supplies, even a routine that keeps him functional. But he's losing his mind in slow motion because humans aren't built for solitary confinement, even when the alternative is getting eaten. Here's the thing about basic bunkers, though. They feel like victories because they're familiar. You recognize the couch, the kitchen, the bedroom. You can almost pretend the world outside isn't dead and rotting, but that familiarity becomes a trap. You get attached to the space, you lower your guard, and you start thinking in terms of days and weeks instead of hours. Then the supplies run out, or the horde outside grows too large, or someone inside makes a mistake, and suddenly you're out of options. But what if you upgraded? What if, instead of a house, you claimed something built for business, something with metal gates and reinforced doors? That's where things get interesting. Because when you move to commercial buildings, you're not just changing locations. You're changing the entire nature of what kills you. Level 3, mid-bunkers. You've moved past houses and apartments, past places designed for living, and into spaces built for business. Pubs, warehouses, police stations, small commercial buildings with roll-down gates and reinforced doors, these are mid-bunkers, and they represent a massive leap in defensive capability. The walls are thicker, the entrances are fewer, and there's usually something on site that makes defense easier. The problem is, these buildings attract people, and people bring problems that zombies never would. Shaun of the Dead's Winchester Pub is the perfect example of a mid-bunker that should have worked. It's got metal gates over the windows, a solid door, a cricket bat mounted on the wall, and a vinyl collection that could keep morale up for weeks. Shaun's plan is sound. Hole up with his girlfriend, his best mate, his mum, and 2 other survivors until rescue arrives. The pub's small enough to defend, stocked with enough booze to stay hydrated, and isolated enough that the zombie crowd outside stays manageable. But then Ed can't stop making noise. Shaun's stepdad gets bitten, and the group's barely holding it together before the infected break through the floor. Return of the Living Dead takes the warehouse concept and injects it with nightmare fuel. The Oneida Medical Supply Warehouse has everything you'd want in a mid-bunker. Thick walls, limited entry points, industrial equipment that could be weaponized. Then Freddy and Frank accidentally release a zombie from a military canister, the corpse won't stay dead even after dismemberment, and suddenly the warehouse becomes ground zero for an outbreak that spreads across Louisville. Tarman, the sludge-covered zombie from the basement, becomes the icon of the film, proof that mid-bunkers can keep zombies out, but they can't keep them contained once they're already inside. The mechanics of mid-bunkers revolve around creating choke points and eliminating weak spots. Roll-down metal gates over windows stop zombies from seeing inside and reduce the number of entry points that need defending. Loading docks and back entrances get sealed first because they're where the walls are weakest. Shaun of the Dead's group stacks tables and chairs against the doors, uses the pub's pool cues and darts as improvised weapons, and tries to stay quiet enough that the horde outside doesn't realize they're worth the effort. That's where these bunkers fall apart, though. Shaun and Ed have been best friends for years, but the stress of the apocalypse turns every minor disagreement into a screaming match. Ed's refusal to take anything seriously gets people killed. Shaun's attachment to his mum blinds him to the fact that she's been bitten and is about to turn. The pub could have held for weeks if everyone inside had stayed calm and focused. Instead, it becomes a pressure cooker where personality clashes escalate into violence, and the zombies outside barely have to do anything except wait. Return of the Living Dead shows the other failure mode, panic. The warehouse has everything needed to survive, but once the zombie outbreak starts inside the building, everyone freaks out and makes the worst possible choices. They try to kill the zombie with embalming tools, which doesn't work. They call the cops, which brings more people into the kill zone. They try to burn the infected corpse, which releases toxic smoke that brings the dead back to life across the entire city. Every decision compounds the disaster until the warehouse stops being a shelter and becomes the epicenter of Kentucky's apocalypse. But here's what nobody tells you about mid-bunkers. They're the first level where survival stops being about evasion and starts being about defense. You're not running anymore. You're digging in, claiming territory, trying to make a stand. The Winchester pub could have been that stand if Sean's group had been even slightly more competent. The warehouse could have contained the outbreak if Frank and Freddie hadn't been idiots. And that failure, that human failure, sets up the question nobody wants to ask. If a pub with metal gates can hold a dozen zombies, what happens when you scale up to a building with multiple floors, loading docks, and enough supplies to last months? What happens when you stop thinking about survival and start thinking about living? That's the next level, and that's where everything changes. Level 4. Okay, bunkers. A mall is a small, self-contained city before the apocalypse, which makes it perfect for rebuilding after. Multiple stores mean endless supplies. Food courts, clothing outlets, sporting goods with weapons, pharmacies with medicine. Upper floors and loading docks create natural choke points. Enough space to house dozens of survivors without everyone stepping on each other. These are okay bunkers. And they're the first level where you stop thinking about survival and start thinking about living. That's the exact moment everything goes spectacularly wrong. Dawn of the Dead, the 1978 Romero classic, locks 4 survivors inside a Pittsburgh mall and watches them build paradise from scratch. Peter, Roger, Steven, and Fran clear out the zombies, seal the entrances, and suddenly they've got everything they need. Food, weapons, entertainment, even mannequins to dress up and pretend the world's still normal. They're living like kings while the undead shuffle around outside, too stupid to figure out how to break in. The mall becomes a playground, a fortress, a reminder of the consumer culture that defined America before it collapsed. Then bikers break through the barricades hunting for supplies, zombies pour in through the breach, and the paradise crumbles in a single afternoon of absolute chaos and bloodshed. The 2004 remake speeds everything up because the zombies run, which means the mall stops being a comfortable refuge and becomes a ticking time bomb. The survivors seal themselves inside, same as the original, but now they're dealing with infected that sprint, coordinate, and pile up against the doors with enough force to crack reinforced glass. The loading docks become battlegrounds. The parking garage turns into a maze of death. The survivors jury-rig armored trucks, weld chainsaws to the front, and attempt a desperate escape because staying means watching the walls fail inch by inch. Army of the Dead swaps malls for a Las Vegas casino and adds a heist angle. The casino's sealed inside a walled quarantine zone, shamblers and alphas roaming the ruins while survivors plan a vault break-in. The building's got reinforced walls, multiple floors, a literal vault full of cash that nobody needs anymore. It's a perfect okay bunker. Defensible, spacious, stocked with everything a pre-war casino would have. Then Zeus, the alpha zombie, demonstrates intelligence by organizing his horde, setting traps, and recognizing threats. The casino stops being a fortress and becomes a hunting ground where the zombies are smarter than the survivors expect, and every room could be an ambush. The mechanics of OK bunkers revolve around abundance and space, which create problems basic and mid-bunkers never had to deal with. Dawn of the Dead survivors spend weeks exploring the mall, finding new stores, hauling supplies back to their makeshift apartments on the upper floors. They've got so much space they start getting territorial. Steven marks off areas as his. Tensions flare over who controls what. The abundance makes them soft. They stop worrying about zombies because the doors are holding and start worrying about boredom, comfort, maintaining the illusion of normalcy. Then the bikers show up and prove that human threats are worse than undead ones because humans want what you have and they're willing to kill for it. Army of the Dead takes a different approach. The casino's sealed and the zombies inside have had months to adapt. Zeus isn't just surviving, he's ruling. He's got a queen, a horde that follows orders, and territory he'll defend with coordinated attacks. The survivors planning the heist treat the casino like it's just another OK bunker. Clear the zombies, grab the cash, get out. But Zeus treats it like home, and he's willing to sacrifice his entire horde to protect it. Here's the thing about OK bunkers. They're the first level where survival feels achievable. You've got supplies, space, and defenses strong enough to hold off hordes. But that comfort breeds complacency. Dawn of the Dead survivors get so comfortable they forget the world outside is still dying. They throw parties, raid the sporting goods store for fun, and treat the apocalypse like an extended vacation. That's when the bikers break in, and remind them that walls only work if people respect them. Okay, bunkers represent the point where the question shifts from can we survive to can we live? And the answer in every film is the same. You can try, but the world won't let you. Abundance attracts raiders. Space creates conflict. Defensibility gives you false confidence right before something you didn't plan for tears it all down. But here's what makes this level truly fascinating. If a mall full of supplies can't save you and a casino with a literal vault can't protect you, what happens when you move to a structure actually designed for defense? What happens when you claim a building purpose-built for containment, a place with guard towers, armories, and walls meant to keep people in that now keep zombies out? That's the upgrade. And that's where power dynamics become deadlier than any horde. Level 5. Legendary bunkers, prisons, casinos, Fortified compounds, places designed to keep people in, repurposed to keep zombies out. These are legendary bunkers, and they're built different from everything that came before. Fences, walls, guard towers, armories, an infrastructure designed for lockdown and control. You're not improvising anymore. You're living in a structure purpose-built for containment, and for the first time since the outbreak started, survival feels like more than just a desperate hope. That's when the real problems start, because legendary bunkers don't fail due to structural weakness. They fail because power corrupts, and everyone inside starts fighting over who gets to wield it. I Am Legend gives us a legendary bunker on a residential scale. Robert Neville's fortified townhouse in Manhattan, he's got steel shutters that roll down at sunset, UV floodlights to fry any Darkseeker that gets too close, and a basement lab where he's trying to engineer a cure. The house holds every night, while intelligent zombies test the defenses, learning patterns, waiting for mistakes. Neville's survived for 3 years because his bunker's perfect, self-sufficient, defensible, isolated enough that he's not attracting constant attention. But isolation's killing him just as surely as the Darkseekers would. He talks to mannequins, stages conversations, clings to routines because without them, he'd go completely insane. Army of the Dead's casino vault takes legendary bunkers to their logical extreme. The vault's inside a sealed building surrounded by shipping containers that form a wall around the quarantine zone. The vault door's designed to withstand explosives, the interior's climate-controlled, and there's $200 million in cash that nobody needs anymore. It's the perfect treasure at the center of a death maze. The casino itself becomes a legendary bunker by accident, abandoned by humans, claimed by Zeus and his Alpha Horde, transformed into a zombie kingdom with rules and hierarchy. The mechanics of legendary bunkers revolve around enforced order and military-grade defenses. I Am Legend shows this in excruciating detail. Neville's daily routine is clockwork, because it has to be. He scavenges during the day when Darkseekers are dormant, returns before sunset, seals the house, and rides out the night while zombies test his defenses. The UV lights aren't just deterrents, they're weapons. The steel shutters aren't just barriers, they're bunker-grade protection that could withstand a small explosion. Army of the Dead's vault operates differently. It's not meant to be lived in, it's meant to be impenetrable. The survivors need a safecracker, cutting torches, and military-grade equipment just to get inside. Once they're in, they've got hours before the building's nuclear leveling, which means the vault stops being a bunker and becomes a time-locked prison. Zeus has turned the building into a functioning zombie society. He's got a queen, a hierarchy, territorial boundaries, and he'll negotiate with humans if they respect those boundaries. The survivors ignore this, treat Zeus like any other zombie, and that arrogance gets them killed. The psychological toll of legendary bunkers is worse than any previous level because they create the illusion of safety. I Am Legend's Neville believes his house is impregnable right up until the Darkseekers adapt and find a way in. He's lived there for years, survived thousands of nights, and that survival breeds confidence that crosses into arrogance. When the defenses finally fail, he's not prepared because he stopped believing they could. But there's something even more disturbing about legendary bunkers. They work so well that they make you forget what's waiting outside. Neville's routine is so perfect that he forgets the Darkseekers are learning, adapting, planning. The casino survivors are so focused on the vault that they forget Zeus is smarter than they are. And that's the trap. Legendary bunkers don't just protect you, they blind you. But what if you went deeper? What if you built a bunker that didn't just keep zombies out, but made it impossible for them to even know you're there? Underground complexes with air filtration, hydroponics, enough supplies to last years. That's the next level. And that isolation, that complete separation from everything that makes you human, that's where the real horror lives. Level 6. Apex bunkers. Go underground far enough, and the surface world stops mattering. Apex bunkers are buried complexes with blast doors, air filtration systems, hydroponics, armories, and enough supplies to last decades. Government-built, military-operated, designed to survive nuclear war and accidentally perfect for surviving zombie apocalypses. These are the bunkers where you can actually wait out the end of the world, where you're so isolated that zombies can't reach you even if they wanted to. The problem is, isolation destroys people faster than any zombie ever could, and when you're trapped underground with the same people for months or years, every personality flaw becomes a death sentence. Day of the Dead is the apex of apex bunkers, Romero's 1985 masterpiece about a Florida underground facility where scientists and soldiers are trying to survive and failing spectacularly. The bunker's a Cold War relic, built to withstand nuclear strikes, now housing a handful of survivors trying to domesticate zombies and find a cure. Dr. Logan's got a lab, Captain Rhodes has an armory, and Bub the zombie has learned to salute and fire a pistol because Logan's been teaching him like a trained dog. The facility's perfect, completely sealed, self-sufficient, protected by tons of concrete and steel. But Rhodes and Logan hate each other. The soldiers are going insane from claustrophobia, and the zombies locked in the underground pens are one broken door away from overrunning everything. Day of the Dead Bloodline, the 2018 remake, tries to modernize the concept with faster zombies and updated lab tech. The bunker's still underground, still sealed, still perfect for long-term survival. But the remake adds a smart zombie named Max, who was obsessed with the protagonist before he turned, and now he's obsessed enough to figure out how the bunker works and lead a horde inside. The Apex bunker fails not because of structural weakness, but because smart zombies are a different threat entirely. The mechanics of Apex bunkers revolve around self-sufficiency and isolation. Day of the Dead's facility has generators that'll run for decades, hydroponics growing fresh vegetables, enough ammunition to hold off an army. The scientists have a lab for research, the soldiers have quarters for downtime, and there's a massive storage area filled with supplies. Everything you need to survive indefinitely, as long as you can handle being buried alive. The problem is, humans aren't meant for this. The soldiers in Day of the Dead are already cracking. One's drinking himself into oblivion. Another's talking about deserting to the surface even though it's a death sentence. The psychological breakdown in Apex bunkers is a constant across every depiction. Day of the Dead's Rhodes starts the film barely holding it together and ends it completely unhinged, executing survivors and threatening scientists because he's lost any sense of purpose beyond control. The isolation's driven him insane, and his insanity infects everyone around him. Logan's so focused on his research, he's using human corpses for experiments without consent, dehumanizing the dead because he's already stopped seeing the living as people. Here's the thing about Apex bunkers. They're the first level where zombies stop being the primary threat. Day of the Dead could have lasted years if Rhodes and Logan had cooperated. Bloodline's survivors could have held indefinitely if Max wasn't intelligent. But Apex bunkers don't fail due to external pressure. They fail because isolation amplifies every human flaw until something snaps. Paranoia, cabin fever, power struggles, boredom, these are the threats that end Apex bunkers, and they're all self-inflicted. The ultimate irony is, these bunkers work exactly as designed. They keep zombies out, provide everything survivors need, and could theoretically support life for decades. But they weren't designed for the psychological toll of being buried alive while the world ends above you. They weren't designed for humans who need sunlight, space, purpose, and hope. So here's the question that matters. If underground isolation drives people insane, what happens when you scale up? What if you built walls around an entire city, created an enclave large enough to house thousands, gave people space and light, and the illusion of normalcy? That's the final level. That's where you stop hiding from the apocalypse and start rebuilding civilization on top of its corpse. And that's where humanity's arrogance reaches its absolute peak. Level 7. God-tier bunkers. Walled cities, island fortresses, aircraft carriers turned into floating nations. These are God-tier bunkers, and they're not about survival anymore. They're about rebuilding. You're not hiding from zombies. You're creating new societies with governments, economies, and militaries capable of retaking territory. These bunkers house thousands, support agriculture and industry, and represent humanity's attempt to claw its way back from extinction. They're also massive targets that attract every zombie horde within miles, prove that humanity learned absolutely nothing from the apocalypse, and fail spectacularly when those failures matter most. World War Z gives us Jerusalem, a walled city that saw the zombie plague coming and sealed itself off before the outbreak spread. Massive concrete walls surrounding the old city, military checkpoints, refugee processing, even loudspeakers broadcasting prayers to show the world that civilization survived. It's perfect, defensible, organized, big enough to sustain a population. Then someone starts singing over the PA system. The noise attracts every zombie in the region, and the horde piles against the walls until they literally climb each other to get over the top. Thousands of zombies creating a living ramp of corpses, flooding over the walls and turning the city into a slaughterhouse in minutes. Land of the Dead shows the other version. Fiddler's Green, a luxury high-rise in Pittsburgh where the rich live like the apocalypse never happened. The city's surrounded by water and electric fences protected by a mercenary army, and the wealthy inside throw parties while the poor outside scavenge for scraps. It's a functioning society with class divisions, jobs, currency, and all the problems that led to the apocalypse in the first place. Then Big Daddy, a smart zombie who used to be a gas station attendant, leads a horde across the river and proves the fences don't matter when zombies learn to adapt. The mechanics of God-tier bunkers are all about scale and organization. World War Z's Jerusalem requires military coordination to process refugees, distribute supplies, and maintain the walls. They've got supply lines, command structures, and enough manpower to actually defend the perimeter. The problem is, scale creates vulnerability. A breach in a level 3 bunker means a dozen people die. A breach in Jerusalem one means thousands die, and the panic from watching walls fail triggers stampedes that kill more people than the zombies do. Land of the Dead's Fiddler's Green has the same problem. The high-rise is defendable, water on 3 sides, electric fences on the 4th, fireworks to distract zombie hordes while scavenger teams make supply runs. Kaufman, the guy running the city, has created a functioning economy with jobs and commerce. It works until Big Daddy figures out that water doesn't stop zombies who don't need to breathe, and then the entire defensive strategy collapses. The psychological aspect of God-tier bunkers is hope mixed with paranoia. World War Z's refugees believe Jerusalem's walls make them safe, and that belief keeps them functional. The second the walls fail, that hope inverts into pure terror, because the one thing they trusted to protect them proved inadequate. Land of the Dead's wealthy live in denial, partying in penthouses while ignoring the zombies and the poor suffering below. That denial's functional until Big Daddy forces them to confront reality, and then the entire social structure collapses. Here's the thing about God-tier bunkers. They're gambles. World War Z bets that walls can hold hordes, and the bet fails when zombies adapt. Land of the Dead bets that water and fences can contain the threat, and the bet fails when zombies get smart enough to circumvent them. Every God-tier bunker represents humanity's best attempt to rebuild, and everyone proves that rebuilding's harder than surviving. If you enjoyed this video and want to see the 7 levels of zombie weapons, click the video on the screen.